Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Brian Petro. My company is Bright Productions. We're an ad agency and marketing company. Been around for 25 years. And I am going to go to the next slide here so you can see what I'm talking about. Background information. So, been around for a while. Our background that is relevant to you is we've been working with Soligent for a couple years. Historically, we also worked with PetersenDean. And honestly, what I think I'm bringing to the table that hopefully you'll find valuable is my family, I grew up in a contractor's house. So my dad was a general contractor, built steel buildings, and I understand the life of a small contractor. When I was approached by Soligent about this presentation, the idea was, what can we do? This is Soligent talking to me, to support our installers. Of course, they want to do that all the time, but especially right now during COVID-19 with the special challenges that we have. A lot of people are looking at the economics coming up, and pretty much the consensus is that there's going to be some kind of a recession, and they wanted to support you. So that's my goal here. I want to do everything. I want to give you as much information as I can that I think are projects you could start today. A lot of them are shoestring based. They're inexpensive things. There are some things that I'm going to talk about that cost some money too. Because I can't tailor this specifically to your company because I don't know your company yet, I'm going to speak in generalities because I have to. However, what that means is we're going to cover a lot of stuff. I tend to talk kind of fast, sorry. But it's okay if you don't catch it all. We're going to post this slideshow. Actually, it's going to be emailed to you after the presentation. And as Eric mentioned, Soligent has offered to underwrite one-on-one discussions with me and all of you afterwards. So please contact me. There'll be contact information afterwards, and we can talk specifics about your company. So moving forward. Oh, I'm sorry, one other thing. What I've seen as a participant in these type of webinars is there's usually a lot of information that I know. There's lots of things that I've heard before. That will probably be the case for you as well. But there's usually one or two nuggets, and that's what I'm hoping for. So that's why that pen and paper are there, those little things that you find interesting, so then we can circle back to those when we do our one-on-ones. So everything that we're going to talk about today really applies all the time, but you'll see I'm purposely putting a COVID-19 twist on them. The things I want to cover are general branding, figuring out who you are and how you project that to potential clients. What we can do to try to improve, increase, turbocharge your current referral system. What things you can look at to audit your own website, improve your website. What things you might want to consider doing with regard to social media, and also some general basics on how lead generation works, online leads, buying them, creating them yourself, how that works. As I mentioned, as Eric mentioned, you don't have to take notes on everything we're doing here because I'm going to have this slide deck for you later, but do jot down notes on what it is you want to cover when we talk one-on-one. So, branding. General idea behind branding is figuring out who you are and how you can project that to your potential audience to get some new business. It's actually the point. A lot of the things that we're talking about are a hierarchy, and this is the very starting point, and everything builds upon this. So this is the foundational stuff. Who are you? What makes you different? Why would somebody want to hire you? So it's easy to say. It's very hard to figure out. Actually, as a marketing company ourselves, we just spent, hopefully you won't spend this long, but I'm thinking at least 6 months with an internal conversation here about who my company is. You don't have to spend 6 months doing it. But it could be, what's different about you? It could be that you're bigger. It could be that you're smaller. It could be that you're the new guys. It could be that you're the old guys that have been around forever. It could be that you're the roofers. It could be that you're the guys that have more finance options or know more about financing. There are any number of different things that you can say that make you who you are. The thing that's important about it is that you differentiate. You want your brand ID to be unique. You want it to be have value to your potential. You know, just being different is good enough. The difference needs to actually matter to your target market. So once you figure that out, and I'm going to parallel, seeing that my company has just gone through this whole odyssey. It'll help me explain this to you. The thing that we came away from when we had a lot of internal discussions was that we've been successful at hiring a lot of people that are pretty smart, some bright people who have some good ideas. So that's great. That actually has value to our clients. But the next step is, well, how do you put that into a message that you're going to say? You can't just run around and say, we're smart, hire us. Same thing with a lot of these. We're big, hire us. No, you don't hit things right on the nose like that. If you think of like Coca-Cola, they don't say we taste good, so buy us. They say have a Coke. What is their slogan? Have a smile. Drink Coke, have a smile. So you're inferring what you're saying. So for example, for ours, and I came up with this yesterday, so hopefully I'll be able to remember it. It was every marketing success starts with a bright idea. So that was our way of saying that. Then you have to think about, well, how do you work that message into everything that you're going to put out to the world? So your signs, your flyers, your trucks, your website, your social media, all those things, how do you integrate that message into it? So that's both the messaging of the text, the copy that you're saying, as well as the imagery. What kind of graphics do you want to use? Things like that. When you think about those, I'll mention this later when we're talking about social media, but you can't just lift images you find online. There are some great opportunities to use stock photography that's really inexpensive online. That's what I would do. You can also take some photography yourself. You need to be careful with that. There's a lot of homegrown photography that frankly isn't super good. I would think probably the most likely place that you'll be able to use stuff you shot yourself is before after photos. Again, we'll hit that more later. But the important takeaway here about the branding is that you need to have a very defined idea of who you are and what you're doing and what the value is to your client before you can move on to these other steps. One of the things that marketing guys talk about a lot is an elevator speech, where if you were turning to someone in an elevator and you in one sentence needed to say what it is you do, where they just get it and it's just simple, that's a good test for if you're on the right track. So very broad general branding stuff. So moving on to what you do with that. The thing that I spent the most time on putting together this presentation, and the thing that I think will have the most value for you for the least dollars into it, is referrals. That's traditionally how clients or how contractors usually get their business anyway. And what I wanted to do was think, what can we do to try to turbocharge that referral system and make sure you get every single piece of business you can from your existing clients? So to me, that starts with obvious signage like on your trucks, yard signs, t-shirts you have in your guys that are working, the stuff that's there that people see when you're working. If you don't have yard signs about your company, you should have them. Now, the thing that I was thinking about, though, specifically with COVID-19 is I am seeing there are a lot of, let's back up a step. So the goal with the yard signs, of course, is to have the neighbors see this work and think, wow, this is a good idea, I should do it. The special issue with COVID is, though, that we are running into some neighbors who are actually irritated with their neighbors because they're having work done. They may not understand the idea of essential infrastructure, which is what solar installation is, and they're, in theory, actually helping the situation and not hurting, but they might not get that. And really, perception is what matters here in marketing. So one of the things that I was thinking about is, even if you have existing yard signs saying what your company is, you might want to consider either revising them or getting a second set of signs that just says, we're essential infrastructure. Solar installation is essential infrastructure. The goal is to try to address ahead of time any concerns neighbors might have about why you're working. And because again, it's far less likely you're going to get them as a client if they're irritated with you in the first place for being out there. I would consider that. I actually went as far as gumming up some potential signage. And if that's something that you want to work on in our one-on-ones, I'd be happy to talk to you about it because I think that could be really helpful, especially considering, and this is the next thing I'm moving on to, is normally what I'd be telling you to do is to be knocking on everybody's door in the, I don't know, 1 block radius around every job you do. But you can't do that now. Not only would I not knock on people's doors during this time, I wouldn't even leave a flyer because people don't even want a stranger walking up to their door at this point. So how can we deal with this? What I would say is have your guys go out and get the addresses of all these people that you would have knocked on their doors or left flyers or whatever, and mail them something instead. The post office is saying that they're not seeing any cases of COVID happening through the mail. And generally speaking, people are happy to get mail right now. They're happy for any communication that doesn't involve physical touch. So that flyer that you would have left there, mail it to them. Yes, it'll cost a little more. Postcards, brochures, 3-fold brochures, whatever your best pitch is, I would suggest that you use that. And speaking of best pitch, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. When we were talking about branding and your message, everything I said, I'm going to stand by, but I'm going to add one other thing, which is specific to COVID. I'm thinking about the mindset of your potential clients. And right now, people are tending to be somewhat fearful financially, pulling back from making new investments. If you were thinking about buying a car, you're probably not going to buy a car for a little bit. Things like that. And of course, solar installs could see that too. Even though it doesn't necessarily, depending on how you finance it, it could save you money. People are just pulling back in general. So I think an important part of the pitch that you come up with, especially now, should be there's money savings here. You can potentially save money depending on how it's financed on day one. You can save money on your power bill. I think that is the message that you lead with through this, because there's a lot of uncertainty and people have lost jobs. People are worrying about losing jobs. Even people that are working at home like me in my wonderful home office here, are wondering, well, when I go back to work, I've got a job, but is my company going to lose a bunch of business, and am I going to end up being out of work or doing less hours? So I think addressing the financial issue is the key to all this. And I would definitely lead with a pitch about cost savings. Not that this doesn't cost you money, it will save you money, and it potentially can save you money on day one if that's what you want. So we talked about letters, we talked about yard signs. Online reviews. So I listed here the 3 leaders are Google, Yelp, and Facebook. There are a number of different places online where people can review your business. That is an online referral system, and you should do it. You should take advantage of it. As a matter of fact, you should have a program for it. So what I would suggest is you have on a regular basis, I don't know, once a week, every couple of weeks, however often you want, you fire off some emails to existing happy clients requesting that they go and review you. And you can include in those emails links to where they can review you on Google, Yelp, or Facebook. You want to stay within there are parameters as far as soliciting reviews. The goal here isn't to break the rules of these programs. And I would not ask for good reviews. I would just ask for a review, but the chances are the people who are going to do the reviews are going to give you good ones. There's a couple of reasons why it's really important to be proactive about this. Not only is it helpful to have lots of good reviews floating around about you online, and by the way, the Google one is Google My Business. What we're talking about there is when you do a search for, let's say, a local plumber, you search plumber and your city in Google. Over on the right side, a lot of times there'll be a company pop up with like their logo, maybe a map and their hours, and over there will also be some reviews. That's what I'm talking about for the Google reviews, is the Google My Business. That's what that block is called. Yelp, you probably know what that is. Facebook also allows for reviews. So one reason that it's important to be proactive about that is just to have lots of positive reviews about you. The other reason is, unfortunately, there are always crazy trolls out there who will review you negatively regardless of what you do. It will happen. And it's not, starting up one of these accounts, claiming one of them, and working with them doesn't increase your chances of getting the crazy people. The crazy people are out there, whether you do something about it or not. So the reason it's important to be constantly working to get sane, positive reviews out there is to drown out the bad ones. There's almost no way to have a bad review removed from any of these. And it doesn't matter if it's completely bogus. If everything they say is a complete fabrication, none of these guys care. I mean, seriously, the only way I've ever heard of that something was removed is if it was actually obscene or if it was racist. Besides that, it's staying. What you do is you drown it out with good stuff. So that should be an ongoing thing. Reach out to referral sources. So if you don't, you should have a steady source of referrals. You should be working with financiers or contractors with other specialties or realtors or whatever it is. Reach out. You should be reaching out to those industries. You should already have those relationships, hopefully, of people who will refer business to you. If you do already have that system, now is the time to reach out to all of them and say, hey, we're working. We're one of those essential infrastructure companies that can still work. So please continue to refer stuff to us. If you have a system to incentivize those referrals where you're paying commissions, whatever, reinforce those. Consider maybe even giving more for those. If there's a particular industry that you've been successful in getting referrals from, then reach out to more people in that industry and see if you can work with them. Maybe experiment with some new industries as companies that might refer to you. Something that maybe nobody's thought of. Landscape contractors or something different. Although you don't always put panels on the roof. Sometimes you put them in the landscaping. So whatever that is, reach out to those referral sources, because what's better than getting new clients one at a time is getting new clients through a source that gives you lots. So I would definitely work on those. That's a good thing to do if you have a downtime right now. Testimonials. So we're going to be talking, as we go through my notes here, a bunch of different places where it would be helpful for you to add new content to your website, to social media, to like these brochures or flyers that I was talking about mailing out. Any of these different places, a bunch of different places where I'm going to be encouraging you to create new content. One of the most powerful things to create for this new content are testimonials from happy customers. The reason for that is it's totally different to have a happy owner say how wonderful you are than for you to say how wonderful you are. So there is a magic trick to get great, perfectly written testimonials, because it can be difficult to do it if you don't know how. This is how you do it. I'm going to tell you the magic right now. You write them yourself. So what you do is you just finished a job, you're talking to the owner, they're super happy and they're like, wow, you guys were so clean, or it was so fast, or that guy was giving us such a hard time and you really knew how to handle that, and whatever that is, because there's always that moment when you finish a job when people are so happy that it's done and they made the right decision and everything. At that moment, you look them in the eye and you say, I am so glad you were happy with how this went. Would you mind if I please wrote a very short testimonial that just said exactly what you just said for you, and then you could approve it or edit it or do whatever you want, because that would be valuable to my business to go get new clients. And they're sitting there and they're so happy everything is done and the job is complete, and they'll be happy to give you a permission to do that. So then you go back to your office and you write up your own testimonial from them. Write whatever you want. I mean, ideally, write what they just told you and email it to them and say, hey, thank you very much for allowing me to do this. This is my rough draft. Can you please either approve this or edit it however you'd like? And I'm going to tell you firsthand, because I've done this, 99% of the time, they're going to say, this is perfect, thank you very much, and just approve it. And now you have a testimonial written that says exactly what you wanted it to say, that you can use with the owner's permission. I probably, if you're going to publish it a bunch, I wouldn't use last names. You know, I might say Joe B or whatever, use like a last initial or something just for their privacy. Same thing, by the way, I'm going to mention something later about photography. I mentioned before, after pictures before. You want to definitely get permission to use those. You can download online photo release forms, just generic little one-pager, get signatures on those. Because again, we want to do everything on the up and up, and never have somebody unhappy because of what you did to market your business later. So there's testimonials. Do that. And again, that should be a part of your regular program. Every single owner, you should try to get a testimonial. I've actually talked to sales guys that that's their main technique they use for selling. They have, what they do is they'll have a folder, you know, this guy had been doing it for years, of hundreds and hundreds of testimonials. And what he'd do is sort them by topic. And then when he was pitching to a new client, he'd try to figure out what their topic was that they were interested in, and then he'd pull testimonials based on that topic. So if their big concern was getting past inspections, he'd have a file folder of all the people who were talking about how wonderful it was to deal with you on inspections. If it was about you know, job site cleanliness, he'd have another folder there of all the people talking about how wonderful, how clean we are. So he would put together a pitch for them based on these testimonials that were for them after he figured out what their thing was. So testimonials, good stuff. Email list. You should also be maintaining an email list. So this should include not only every owner that you've ever worked with, but everybody you've talked to that you didn't close. That's actually the important part, because there's lots of people who think about doing solar for years before they actually do it. You should maintain an email list. And again, this is another one of these things where we're going to, I'm going to point out things that you can create content based on. We just talked about testimonials. And then on a regular basis, you can reach out to these people and include little bits and pieces of this different content. So you don't have to be creating all of this from scratch. You have one channel that you're using to create content on an ongoing basis, and you distribute that to all of these different places that we're going to be talking about. So that email list, what I would suggest you do, there's a bunch of different companies that you can use to send out the email when your list is small. And when I say small, I mean like under a couple thousand. When your list is small, they're usually free. The one that we use a lot is called MailChimp. And the value in using another company to send these out rather than just setting up a list on your own email is that there actually are some laws about how to send out commercial email, and you don't want to break those rules. And if you use a company like MailChimp, for example, they have built into it, you know, the link at the bottom to unsubscribe and your address at the bottom, all these requirements that you don't want to have to drag yourself through and figure out, they've already got handled. So I would definitely do that. Email list, and again, sending out an email is close to free, so good resource. Moving on from there. Again, I spent the most time on referrals because that's the thing that I think has the most for you. Lots of other things you can do though. Websites. So look at your website, because probably all of you have one. The first thing I would look at in the auditing of your website is that brand that we talked about, the it, that, you know, who you are, what makes you different. Is that obvious? Is it obvious when you hit that page? Can a 3-year-old figure out in 2 seconds what's different about you, why they should hire you, what the advantage is to them, what benefits you offer? So is that brand message strong and immediate when you hit that home page? The other thing is there a strong and immediate, obvious call to action on that home page? If the goal when you get somebody to your website is to get them to call you or fill out a contact form or ask for more information or whatever it is that you want them to do, it has to be really obvious when you hit that home page, towards the top, big. You know, if you want them to phone you, say, call us now with a phone. I know it sounds obvious, but I'm telling you, most sites don't have that. If you look at our website, I bet you I could improve it in this area too. So you want to have that brand message of who you are, big and obvious on the homepage. You want to have a call to action, whatever it is you want them to do, make it just, one of the measurements I'll use is think like, my mother, she's with it. She's an 80-year-old woman, widow, and she is with it. But that being said, she's a good test. If she can hit this website and it's obvious to her how to do this, we're probably good. Moving forward from there, mobile friendly. So this is old news that your website needs to be mobile friendly. This isn't new. Starting like 2 years ago, Google was saying they were actually getting more searches on mobile devices than they were on desktops. So it's mobile first. It is difficult for some web developers to really wrap their brain around this because they've been working on desktop versions for so long. But honestly, how your website looks and functions on a mobile device is more important than it is on a desktop device. So pull it up on a smartphone, pull it up on an iPhone and a Android phone, and make sure everything is working the way you want. Make sure it's easy to navigate around. Make sure that the buttons aren't tiny so you can't click on things. Make sure if there's a phone number that if you click on it, it wants to dial, because there's code you put in a website to make it so the phone numbers are clickable. The other thing that's important is, oh, and by the way, some of the things we're talking about with your website here, they sound, I mean, they're brand oriented, they're market oriented. Some of them are technical that I'm going to be talking about, but they actually all also affect your search results. Because Google, one of the things they look at to decide if your website should come up before somebody else's is how mobile friendly it is, because that's important to them. Same thing with this next point I'm going to come up with, which is ADA compliance, Americans with Disability Act. So there are actually companies right now that are getting sued because their website is not ADA compliant. I know it sounds weird, but it's a thing. It's a thing starting, again, this isn't new news. This was like more than a year ago. You started seeing lawsuits, and mostly what it was about was people who had websites that had images that did not have text behind it to say what was on the image. The biggest issue is there are vision impaired people who use screen readers to cruise the web. So maybe a blind person who can't see your website at all, but they have a program that will read your website to them. But if you have a bunch of images and no text behind them to tell them what the image is, then they don't have full access to your website. And what's happening is you've got some rather bottom-feeding attorneys that are finding themselves a disabled person and then going out and suing thousands of websites at a time. It's the same exact thing that was happening to restaurants with their bathrooms years ago, but now it's happening to websites. This is an important topic. Again, the obvious stuff about it is either the text that's behind images. The other part is videos that need to have captions on them. There are some other things. You don't want text that's tiny. You don't want background colors that are similar to the text colors, so it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the two. There are a couple different websites that have automated tools that will test your website for ADA compliance. So you might want to look up some of those. I'm sure if you just type into Google ADA website compliance tool, you'll find some tools on that, or hire a professional to help you with it. So addressing this issue actually will help you in two ways. Not only will it reduce the chances that you'll be sued over this, and by the way, this is not just big companies that are getting sued over it. What I'm seeing happening is you'll find an attorney who will pick an industry, and then they will have one real lawsuit they'll do in that industry, and then they will carbon copy that, I mean like letter for letter, like photocopy all the paperwork for this and sue 500 different companies in that industry with the same paperwork, and then walk right down the line and offer to settle with each one for $2,000–3,000 a piece. And right down the line, everybody folds because it's easier to pay off $2,000 than to fight it. So doing the ADA thing will do two things for you. Number one, it will help ward off the lawsuits. It's not a guarantee, but hopefully it'll help. Number two, you get a search boost from Google. Google likes ADA compliant websites. And so all of the things being equal, if your competitor has a site that is not ADA compliant and yours is, they're going to serve yours first. Other website issues, security. So a lot of websites out there are built with pre-built software. The most popular one is called WordPress. There's a very good chance that some, maybe most of you use WordPress. There's other software as well. It's very important that any of the software that's very popular is updated often. They regularly have security problems. There's some really good things about WordPress. We have a bunch of clients that have WordPress websites, but there's also some things that aren't so good, and security is one of them. So make sure that all the software for your website is up to date, that the software is up to date, that the themes are up to date, that the plugins are up to date, because otherwise there's lots of people who would love to wreak havoc on your website. Generally speaking, if you keep that stuff up to date, you're safe. Another thing I would mention is SSL certificates. There are security certificates that help users know that your website is legitimate. You may not be familiar with this, but you've actually seen it already. Most websites that you go to, when you look at the address after you've typed it into the address bar, once you go to the website, there's a little padlock next to the address in your browser. That padlock is proof that they have an SSL certificate. They're inexpensive. As a matter of fact, the most popular company, it's free to get their certificate. You want to make sure your website has one of those because people feel more secure about it if you have one. And again, Google will give you a boost in your search results. All other things being equal, if your website has an SSL certificate and your competitors doesn't, you're going to show up first. Again, most websites have SSL certificates now, so probably you're okay. I would talk to your web developer about it and make sure that's the case. If you go to your website and you don't see that little padlock right next to the address, then that is a heads up for you that you should work on that. Search. There are two main ways that people get to your website through search. There are buying ads, the paid sponsored ads. That's generally speaking, when you do a search on Google, the top couple, 2, 3, 4 search results are ads, and they'll say right on them sponsored or ads. And then the rest below that are natural search results. They're results that you don't pay for. Both approaches are good. We do both for our clients. I'm going to come back and hit more about the buying search results later. Right now, I'm just going to hit some quick things about what you can do for natural search results, because as I said, I'm spending more time on the shoestring, what we can do inexpensively right now. But be aware that working on your natural search results is time intensive. There's no guaranteed on results, and it can take months or even years to show progress in this area. So I want you to be realistic about what you can do with this. It is doable to help your search results, your natural search results, but it is a big undertaking. Things that are important in that area are that you have, well, you start figuring out what your target keywords are. What keywords do you want people to find you under? And you have to be picky about it, because of course, your average website owner says, well, I want my website to show up no matter what somebody searches. That's nice, but that's not possible. The idea behind doing SEO, search engine optimization, this is trying to get the best natural search results. The goal is to convince Google what your website is about. So then when people search that, they'll show your website. The trick is, if you pick too many things that you're trying to convince Google your website's about, you water down the message and Google decides your website's about everything or nothing. It's all the same thing to them. Whereas if you pick some very targeted things that you say your website's about, and then you give Google all the information so they believe that, then it's more likely when somebody searches those specific things that you'll show up. So it's a rifle approach, not a shotgun approach. Those titles, those search phrases that you decide to target, we have a whole process. We work with clients to help figure out what those are, what would be best for them. But I'm telling you in this short conversation that I feel strongly that all of you should have city names in the phrases. You need to pick less than 10 phrases that you want to target your website for. And there should definitely be, like solar installation, my town, or, solar battery backup my town, or whatever the most important phrases are for you mixed in with your town name or maybe a couple towns around you. And again, smaller towns are going to have less competition. So if I pick, if I'm, let's say, in an outskirt of a major metropolitan area, I'm going to pick the couple towns that are in the outskirt where I am. I'm not going to say, in my case, San Francisco or San Jose, because there's going to be too much competition there. I'm going to say, for me, I'm going to say Petaluma, Rohnert Park, maybe Santa Rosa. So you get the idea with that. So you want to pick your phrases carefully. Then you want to make sure those phrases are in the titles of your pages. So in a perfect world, if you want Google to understand that your website is about solar installation in Petaluma, I'm just picking my town, then ideally you should actually have a web page that's dedicated to that, that talks about solar installation in Petaluma. Maybe there's some specific things to Petaluma with regard to solar installation, you know, challenges or exemptions or whatever it is. You should have a page about that, because you're gonna have a hard time convincing Google that your web page is about this list of phrases if you don't actually have content about those phrases. And then the title of that page should be that as well. You don't want titles, page titles that are about, contact us, home. No, that doesn't do you any good. And title is the single most important thing that Google looks at when they're deciding what your web page, your website's about. So you want those search phrases to be in the titles of the pages. You also want to regularly update your website with new content, because Google's going to give preference to websites that look like they're adding new information. So we talked about creating new testimonials, articles of any type. Blogs kind of lend themselves to this. You don't have to have a blog, but it is a good idea to have some way on your website to, on a regular basis, post some new articles. You know, examples could be, well, in a perfect world, you're going to have articles be about your 10 target phrases, but you still want to make it topical as well. So you might have an article about solar installation and COVID-19, and you know why you're still working. You know, you might have one about, let's say, you know, batteries are the new thing since they started turning the power on and off in California. So maybe you'd have an article about, you know, why most people didn't do batteries before, but now it's more doable. Or maybe even explaining why people's power goes out when they have solar, when PG&E turns off their power, because of course most people don't have battery backup, and most people don't understand why. So you should write those articles. Now the good news is you want to keep them really short. Nobody's going to read a long one. And if you set yourself up to write this, you know, 3-page white paper with all these engineering details, you're never going to do it anyway. It's going to be too much of a task, and there's too many other things that are going to put your way up your priority list. So short, 2 or 3 paragraphs about one of your topics that you want to get search traffic on. Use that term maybe a couple different times in that article. The article should be titled that. The page should be titled that. And this new content that you're developing, you can use that in your email newsletter. You can use that in your brochure you mail out. You can use that on your website. So I'm not saying write something new for everything. I'm saying reuse this stuff. Backlinks. It's another thing that Google looks at, is how many other links, how many other websites link to yours. So there are a bunch of different tools online that you can use to measure how many links come back. But it is very important to work on that. The most practical way to work on increasing the links coming back to your website, think of this as the more links you have back to your website, the internet is voting that your website is good. That's the way I would think about it. So the more votes you have, the better. Because again, all things being equal, if you have more links coming back to your website than your competitor does, Google's gonna pick you first. And again, this backlink thing, how many links are going to your website, is one of the most important things that Google looks at in deciding where they're gonna put your natural search results. As a matter of fact, the backlink thing, that's Google's secret sauce. It's not a secret, they tell you, but this is when Google exploded, whatever it was, 10 years ago, and took over the whole search industry. This was their magic thing that they figured out was, hey, all of the things being equal, we can figure out who has the best website based on how many links go to it. So the way you get those links is set yourself a schedule, and on a weekly basis, go out and find different quality blogs and forums that are discussing the solar industry. Set up an account for yourself on those blogs and forums and actually participate in an actual real conversation, giving new good advice to the people who are having these conversations. Now, lucky for you, your industry has a lot of those out there, and you want to every week try to find new ones. You don't want to be going back to the same ones. Because what happens is when you set up an account to have a conversation on this blog or forum, they almost always ask for a link to your website. So you give it to them, then you go and participate in a real conversation where you're helping somebody out. And without even, you don't have to do an advertisee, ooh, come see us and have a link. The blog or forum will actually put the link in for you at the end. So the important part here is just to be genuine and actually really try to help people. Don't do the, come use us ad thing. That's not the appropriate place for it. There's other things too. I'm gonna pick up my pace a little bit just because I want to make sure I get through all this material and have time for questions. I would mention it's good to have a sitemap on your website, just a place where you have links to all of your pages on your site. Google also has a tool called Google Search Console. I would check that out. It will tell you things about when was the last time Google indexed your website and got a copy of it to use for natural search results. It will tell you if there's some problem with your website that was disallowing Google from getting to your website. So it's a free service. And then speaking of free services, the other thing I would look at for your website is Google My Business. There's a program that Google has called Google My Business. I mentioned it earlier in this call. It's that block of information on the right side about some businesses when you do a search in the search results. That is free to claim. So if you haven't already claimed your Google My Business, type in Google My Business, search for yourself, and you can claim your account. And once you claim it, you can upload your logo, you can upload photos, you can put in these articles, you can set your hours, there's all kinds of things you can do in there. So I definitely would take advantage of that. Again, one of the ways Google decides if they like you is if you use their tool. So it's free to use. I would definitely use it. Social media stuff. I think the first place I'd start with that is just to say it's a commitment to work on social media. And I know most contractors' attitude about this would be like, if you've got somebody in the office who has some time, maybe they can look at it a little bit. And if that's your attitude about it, don't do it. But if you want to commit to social media, I would start with Facebook. Facebook is talking to your target market. It's not a bunch of high schoolers. Facebook is soccer moms. It's homeowners. It's who you want to talk to. And I actually talked to my social media manager and said, hey, if I'm a installer and I'm going to participate in social media, what are the kind of things I should post? Because participating in social media isn't just about going out and friending people and liking people and saying you like their stuff or reposting stuff. It's actually about adding new content. So a lot of the stuff, it's a recurring conversation here, is about creating new content. That's what you can do here, but you can keep it simple. And again, any content you create for social media, you can use on all of these other places we talked about too. So some of the things that she mentioned that she thought would be most powerful for you would be before after photos. Again, get permission for them. Company stories, they could be stuff about adding a new truck or your company dog or why you started carrying batteries when you weren't before, or whatever. Facts about home installation. And again, keep these short. They can be like a sentence. Do you know average home installation takes less than a month, or whatever? I just made that up. But facts about home installation. People don't know anything about this stuff. I mean, you know how little they know. So little factoids, and you could write out 20 of them in one shot, and then one at a time, you go grab a stock photo, plunk one of those in there, off it goes. Expectations, same thing. That's kind of facts, expectations, same idea. Things, it could be like, first step is, figuring out your financing, or expectation could be, PG&E is currently taking about this long for their part, or whatever it is. Roof penetrations are guaranteed not to leak, but just stuff that they're going to be concerned about. Maybe go through questions that you often get asked and come up with a frequently asked question list, all the answers, and you just one at a time plug these in as social media posts. Those also are perfect for your website. You should have an FAQ page, a frequently asked question page, where you hit all of those and keep that up to date. And then lastly, of course, we talked about collecting testimonials before. You can take like a little sentence or even a part of a sentence of one of those testimonials and use that in social media. I already mentioned we can reuse all this content. Last thing I was going to mention is lead generation. So if you want to start getting some new business yesterday, one of the ways you can do it, and this is not necessarily a shoestring idea, but it can be very effective, is just to buy leads. So the way that works is, I'm going to use the example that I've heard on the radio a lot lately, which is a place for mom. Have you heard that recently? Or it's radio and TV, I guess. They're marketing companies. The other ones are 1-800-florist, 1-800-dentist. They aren't dentists or florists or assisted living places that are running those ads. Those ads are run by marketing companies. The marketing companies are collecting leads, and then they're turning around and selling them to florists, dentists, and assisted living places. So there are also companies that do that for the solar industry. I have 3 listed here. They're just the first ones I found online that looked like they were relatively big. I am not endorsing them in any way. But generally how it works is you find a company like this, a marketing company who's out, they're out already running a website and buying a whole bunch of traffic to that website and getting people to fill out contact forms. And what you do is you pay per lead for them to mail or email them to you. Usually they email them to multiple people. So like the company, I've done this before for my company, the company I was working with, I crafted with them exactly the kind of leads I was looking for. And then their promise to me was that they only sold them to 3 companies. So they would send an email, it would come in real time. They would email it out to 3 marketing companies, ad agencies like mine at a time. And then boom, I'm jumping on the phone, I'm calling these people, or my salespeople are calling these people to pitch to them. So it gets going right away. These are in theory qualified leads. However, the downside to this is you are obviously putting yourself in direct competition with others in a totally different way than referral. I mean, referrals, the beautiful thing about referrals is, generally speaking, you're not competing at all. The next door neighbor said, hey, we love Bob, and now you're talking to them and they're only talking to you. It's a beautiful thing. This kind of a thing, you are put head to head. Nothing wrong with that, but obviously when you can avoid that, that's good. The other way to do lead generation is to develop your own funnel of leads, where you would be buying ads yourself on Google or Facebook or whatever, sending them to your own landing page where you're trying to convince them to fill out a little lead form, and then you have that lead that you follow up, or your sales guys follow up. Both of those, I think the trick to making them work is numbers. It's a refinement process, and you're constantly watching what you're paying to get the leads, what your conversion rates are for closing, what your average profit is per project, and lining all those numbers up and constantly trying to refine them and improve them, because you're working right next to a competitor who's doing the same thing. So you can sometimes find yourself chasing who's willing to work for the smallest percentage. You don't want to do that. The way to win at this, because you can win at this, is to be better, to work with a better company, have more qualified leads, have a more efficient system for following them up, have better salespeople calling on them. That's how you win at that, is by being more efficient than your competitors who are working the same system. So I'm going to wrap it up. We talked about branding. We talked about referrals. We talked about websites. We talked about social media. We talked about lead generation. When this is done, we're going to, Jamie's going to email out a post-webinar thing. It'll have this slideshow in it. It'll have my contact information. Please, please, please email me. Let's set up a time, and let's talk about how this stuff or anything else you want to talk about can be applied directly to your business. And that, my friends, is what I had for you this morning.